Hey everyone, you're listening to Warikoo on Voice with Warikoo. On this podcast, I talk to you about entrepreneurship, how to grow in life, manage personal finances, handle failures, and a lot more things that just come to my mind. The episode begins. This week, I want to talk about relationships, and not about making relationships, not about maintaining relationships, instead about ending relationships. As would be evident, if not already, a large part of life is not just about making relationships and maintaining them, but also ending them, whether you like it or not. And it surprises me how hard it is to end relationships, how hard it is for us to let go of the emotions that we have come to attach ourselves with when it comes to that relationship. And this is true, by the way, even for relationships that we know have been in some way harmful for us or didn't work out for us, because the truth about relationships is when they start, they're always lovely, which is why we got into them in the first place, right? So go back to your early friendships, go back to your early love relationships, go back to making friends. Everybody was at their best. Everybody was lovely. Everybody was presenting their true, authentic self, but in a way that they could impress you or you were impressed by. And we fell in love. We fell in love with that person. We fell in love with that friend. We fell in love with that colleague. We began to adore them, admire them, respect them. And that somehow just becomes a dominant and a permanent part of our memory that we can never let go of. And it frankly doesn't matter what happened thereafter. Because what happened thereafter gets us to a point where we begin to see the true self of that person, or maybe even our own selves, and we realize, hey, we're not working out each other. This friendship is not good for me. This relationship is not good for me. This work environment is not good for me. This relative is not good for me, whatever the case may be. And you go through agonizing times. You go through ups and downs. You go through so many questions in your own head. Am I wrong? Are they wrong? What went wrong? Why did we get into this? How did we come thus this far and not like each other? And that ends up forming the reason for us to make that decision. It's time to move on. It's time to end. It's not working out. Whether it's something that we impose as a decision on the other person, or whether it's something that we hear from the other person, whether we like it or not, the relationship ends. And when it ends, surprisingly, all that we are left with is just the early part of that relationship getting formed, the wonderful times that we spent. We begin to miss that person. Even if we are angry at that person, even if we hate that person at that point of time, there is a large part of us that still misses that person, craves for that moment to come back again, wishes that somehow time could stop and we just remain in that lovely moment where we were just getting to know each other, where we were at the best of each other's behavior, conduct, worldview. And that was such a wonderful time. It was such a precious moment that I wish I could just hold on for the rest of my life and not have to go through the turmoil that came in later. And that makes ending relationships so hard. It makes it hard because we're always reminded of the lovely time that we had in that relationship, irrespective of how hard that relationship eventually got. But it's also necessary to end relationships. It is because very often we find ourselves in relationships where we begin to lose our own selves, where we suddenly become responsible for somebody else's happiness, where we become responsible for somebody else's miseries, where we're constantly told that we're not doing enough, that we aren't good enough, that we are inadequate, that we are incapable. And that brings us down. It bogs us down. It makes us question our own existence and whether we're doing enough and as needed for this relationship to work. And there's so many times that we would find ourselves questioning whether we're the right person to be in this relationship or not. There's so many times I have questioned when I saw that my school friends were not growing as fast as I was. And there was this gap that was very, very clearly emerging. It was a gap that I couldn't do anything about because I was on my own trajectory in my own direction and we were just going in opposite directions. We were not converging, we were diverging. And it was time for me to say goodbye. It was time because I felt that they were dragging me down, not because they weren't there for me when I needed them. They were. They were the most lovely people that I could have met. But at some point of time, I had grown up and so had they. But we had grown up to become different individuals. I remember that growing up, my best friend was my first cousin. And we spent so many lovely years together, only to drift apart, only to find ourselves as two different people with different worldviews and different ways of approaching things, that we just couldn't connect anymore. To the day that we hardly talk now. And he's living a wonderful life. I'm living my own life. And we're aware of each other's existence, but we're not in each other's life. And that, I feel, is a natural evolution. It's a reflection of how mature you are. If you do know that despite how hard it will be, despite how painful it will be, despite how many times you will question your own existence and whether you're doing the right thing or not, it is indeed the right thing to move on from some relationships. I had often said that one of the best things you can do for relationships that are broken is to move on, because that's the best way you can save whatever is left of it. You don't want to reach a point where the only thing you remember of a relationship is the anger, the hate, the misery, the pain. You want to leave at a point where you're still reminded of the lovely times that you had with the person opposite to you. And you want to still leave and move on because you know that that is the best way to protect that lovely memory and not turn it into something that's bitter. So to everyone who finds themselves in a relationship, whether at work, whether in love, whether with friends, whether with relatives, that they are questioning. They stand in front of the mirror, and if they were to truly, authentically ask ourselves, is this relationship helping me? Or is this relationship sucking energy out of me every single time I spend on it? And if the answer is a yes, an honest yes, but a painful yes, it is a sign of your maturity to move on, not to cling on to what you had, instead to move on with the lovely memories that you have created yourselves. And remind yourself that just because you're letting go of this relationship doesn't mean that you will not find another one. Just because you are in this relationship, don't be scared of letting go of it for the fear that you will never find it again. Because the minute you convince yourself that how you got here was just luck and you don't know how to get it again, you will hold on to even the most miserable things that you have in your life for the fear of losing them. You don't want to be that person. Ending relationships is a sign of maturity. And holding on to the positive memories of every relationship that you've ended is a sign of self-love. All the best. Thank you for listening to this episode of Voice with Warikoo. To be notified of upcoming episodes, be sure to subscribe and follow the show on this app right now. Also, don't forget to rate and review the show because that just feels nice. Thank you.